everybody, it's JoJo, and I'm here to do a ASMR story time. So this is a special Christmas ASMR bedtime story time for you guys today. I have on my Christmas pajamas. Yes. Green and red plaid by Ralph Lauren. Having my Christmas nails. My Christmas eyes from the Rudolph eyeshadow palette from Colourpop. Lipstick is Red Rum by Jeffree Star with Hot Cocoa and Cream lip gloss by Bath & Body Works on top of that. Fragrance of the day is Hot Cocoa and Cream by Bath & Body Works. So now we're gonna go into, we did the Halloween chapter for Halloween. Now we're gonna do the Christmas one in the Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. So I'm currently reading all of the books from Harry Potter right now. I'm currently at the very end of the third one, about to start the fourth one. But this is the first one, and I love this book. It's great. I just read the whole thing through and through. It's like one of the best books ever. So yeah, I'm gonna read you I'm gonna read you the Christmas chapter in this, and yeah. Let's try to find it. I love the illustration in these chapters. It's so pretty and cute. So the Christmas chapter is called The Mirror of Erise. It's chapter 12. This is the Christmas chapter. Okay, so let's begin. So, chapter 12, The Mirror of Erise. Christmas was coming. One morning, in mid-December, Hogwarts woke up to find itself covered in several feet of snow. The lake froze solid, and the Weasley twins were punished for bewitching several snowballs so that they followed Quirrell around, bouncing off the back of his turban. So I want you guys to lay down in bed with a cup of hot tea or a cup of hot chocolate, and I want you guys to just really relax and while I read you the story time, okay? So that's what I want you guys to do right now. Anyways, back to the story. The few owls that managed to battle their way through the stormy sky to deliver mail had to be nursed back to health by Hagrid before they could fly off again. No one could wait for the holidays to start. While the Gryffindor common room and the Great Hall had roaring fires, the drafty corridors had become icy, and a bitter wind rattled the windows in the classrooms. Worst of all were Professor Snape's classes down in the dungeons. They were rose and mist, and before they could kept as close as possible to their hot cauldrons. "I do feel so sorry," said Draco Malfoy, one for potions class, "for all those people who have to stay at Hogwarts for Christmas, because they're not wanted at home." He was looking over at Harry as he spoke. Crabbe and Goyle chuckled. Harry, who was measuring out powdered spine of lionfish, ignored them. Malfoy had been even more unpleasant than usual since the Quidditch match. Disgusted that the Slytherins had lost, he had tried to get everyone laughing at how a wide-mouthed tree frog would be replacing Harry as Seeker next. Then he had realized that nobody found this funny, because they were all so impressed at the way Harry had managed to stay on his buckling broomstick. It was true that Harry wasn't going back to Private Drive for Christmas. Professor McGonagall had come around the week before making a list of students who would be staying for the holidays, and Harry had signed up at once. He didn't feel sorry for himself at all. This would probably be the best Christmas he'd ever had. Ron and his brothers were staying too, because Mr. and Mrs. Weasley were going to Romania to visit Charlie. When they left the dungeons at the end of Potions, they found a large fir tree blocking the corridor ahead. Two enormous feet sticking out of the bottom, and a loud puffing sound told them that Hagrid was behind it. "Would you mind moving out of the way?" Malfoy's cold drawl behind them. "Are you trying to earn some extra money, Weasley, hoping to be gamekeeper yourself when you leave Hogwarts? I suppose that hut of Hagrid's must seem like a palace compared to what your family's used to." Ron dived at Malfoy just as Snape came up the stairs. Weasley, Ron let go front of Malfoy's robes. "I'll get him," said Ron, grinding his teeth at Malfoy. "One of these days I'll get him." "Come on, cheer up. It's nearly Christmas," said Hagrid. Tell you what, come with me and see the Great Hall. Looks a treat. So the three of them followed Hagrid and his tree off to the Great Hall, where Professor McGonagall and Professor Flitwick were busy with the Christmas decorations. The hall looked spectacular. Feastings of holly and mistletoe hung all around the walls, and no less than 12 towering Christmas trees stood around the room. Some sparkling with tiny icicles, some glittering with hundreds of candles. How many days you got left until your holidays? Hagrid asked. Just one, said Hermione. And that reminds me, Harry. Ron, we've got half an hour about lunch. We should be in the library. Oh, yeah, you're right, said Ron, tearing his eyes away from Professor Flitwick, who had golden bubbles blossoming out of his wand and was trailing them over the branches of the new tree. You just have to find out for ourselves. They had indeed been searching Bugs Flannel's name ever since Hagrid had let him slip, because how else were they going to find out what Snape was trying to steal? The trouble was, it was very hard to know where to begin, not knowing what Flamel might have done to get himself into a book. He wasn't in the great wizards of the 20th century, or notable magical names of our time. He was missing, too, from important modern magical discoveries and a study of recent development in wizardry. What are you looking for, boy? Nothing, said Harry. Madame Pince, the librarian, brandished the feather dust at him. You better get out then. Go on out. Once the holidays had started, Ron and Harry were having too good a time to think about Flamel. They had the dormitory to themselves, and the common room was far emptier than usual, so they were able to get the good armchairs by the fire. They sat by the hour, eating anything they could spare on a toasting fork. Bread, English muffins, marshmallows, and plotting ways of getting Malfoy expelled, which were fun to talk about even if they wouldn't work. Ron also started teaching Harry wizard chess. This was exactly like Muggle chess, except that the figures were alive, which made it a lot like directing troops in battle. Ron's set was very old and battered, like everything else he owned. It had one belonged to someone else in his family, in this case, his grandfather. However, old chessmen weren't a drawback at all. Ron knew them so well, he never had trouble getting them to do what he wanted. Harry played with chessmen Seamus Finnegan had let him, and they didn't trust him at all. He wasn't a very good player yet, and they kept shouting different bits of advice at him, which was confusing. Don't send me there. Can't you see his knight? Send him. We can afford to lose him. On Christmas Eve, Harry went to bed looking forward to the next day for the food and the fun, but not expecting any present at all. When he woke early in the morning, however, the first thing he saw was a small pile of packages at the foot of his bed. Merry Christmas, said Harry sleepily scrambled out of the bed and pulled on his bathrobe. You too, said Ron. Oh my God, Harry said. Will you look at this? I've got some presents. What did you expect, turnips? Said Ron, turning to his own pile, which was bigger than Harry's. Harry picked up the top barrel. It was wrapped in a thick brown paper and scrolled across it was to Harry from Hagrid. It was a roughly cut wooden flute. Hagrid had obviously whittled it himself. Harry blew it. It sounded a bit like an owl. A second very small parcel contained a note. We received your message and enclosed your Christmas present from Uncle Vern and Aunt Petunia. Taped to the note was 50 pence apiece. That's friendly, said Harry. Ron was fascinated by the 50 pence. Weird, he said. What a shape. This is money? You can keep it, said Harry, laughing at how pleased Ron was. Hagrid and my aunt and uncle. So who sent these? I think I know who that one's from, said Ron, turning a bit pink and pointing to a very lumpy parcel. My mom. I told her you didn't expect any presents and... Oh no, he groaned. She's made you a Weasley sweater. Harry had torn upon the parcel to find a thick-handed sweater in emerald green and a large box of homemade fudge. Every year she makes us a sweater, said Ron, wrapping his own, and mine's always maroon. That's really nice of her, said Harry, trying the fudge, which was very tasty. His next present also contains candy, a large box of chocolate frogs from Hermione. This only left one parcel. Harry picked it up and felt it. It was very light. He unwrapped it. Something fluid and silvery gray went slithering to the floor, where it lay in gleaming folds. Ron gasped. I've heard of those, he said in a hushed voice, dropping the box of every flavored beans he'd gotten from Hermione. If that's what I think it is, they're really rare and really valuable. What is it? Harry picked up the shining silvery cloth of the floor. It was strange to the touch, like what a roving material. It's an invisibility cloak, said Ron, a look of awe on his face. I'm sure it is. Try it on. Harry drew the cloak around his shoulders and Ron gave a yell. It is. Look down. Harry looked down at his feet, but they were gone. He dashed to the mirror. Sure enough, his reflection looked back at him, just his head suspended in midair, his body completely invisible. He pulled the cloak over his head and his reflection vanished completely. There's a note, said Ron suddenly. A note fell out of it. Harry pulled off the cloak and seized the letter. Written in narrow, loopy writing he had never seen before were the following words. Your father left this in my possession before you died. It is time it was returned to you. Use it well. A very Merry Christmas to you, Harry. There was no signature. Harry stared at the note. Ron was admiring the cloak. I'd given anything for one of these, he said. Anything. What's the matter? Nothing, said Harry. He felt very strange. Who had sent the cloak? Had it really once belonged to his father? Before he could say or think anything else, the dormitory door was flung open and Fred and George Weasley bounded in it. Harry stuffed the cloak quickly out of sight. He didn't feel like sharing it with anyone else yet. Merry Christmas! Hey, look, Harry's got a Weasley sweater too. Fred and George were wearing blue sweaters, one with a large yellow F on it, and the other a G. Harry's is better than ours, though, said Fred, holding up Harry's sweater. She makes more of an effort if you're not family. Why aren't you wearing yours, Ron? George demanded. Come on, get it on. They're lovely and warm. I hate maroon, Ron moaned, half-heartedly as he pulled it over his head. You haven't got a letter on yours, George observed. I suppose she thinks you don't forget your name. But we're not stupid. We know we're called Greg and Forge. What's all this noise? Percy Weasley stuck his head through the door, looking disapproving. He had clearly gotten halfway through unwrapping his presents as he, too, carried a lumpy sweater over his arm, which Fred seized. P for perfect. Get it on, Percy. Come on, we're all wearing ours. Even Harry's got one. I don't want, said Percy thickly as the twins forced the sweater over his head, knocking his glasses. And you're not sitting with the perfects today either, said George. Christmas is a time for family. They frog-marched Percy from the room, his arms pinned to his side by his sweater. Harry had never in all his life had such a Christmas dinner. 100 fat roast turkeys, mountains of roast and boiled potatoes, platters of chick tortillas, tureens of buttered peas, silver boats of thick, rich gravy and cranberry sauce, and stacks of wizard crackers every few feet along the table. These fantastic party favors were nothing like the feeble muggle ones the Dursleys usually bought, with their little plastic toys and their flimsy paper hats inside. Harry pulled a wizard cracker with Fred, and it didn't just bang, it went off with a blast like a cannon and engulfed them all in a cloud of blue smoke. While from the inside exploded a rare admirer's hat and several live white mice, up at the high table, Dumbledore had swept his pointed wizard's hat for flowered bonnets and was chuckling merrily at a joke Professor Flitwick had just read him. Flaming Christmas puddings followed the turkey. Percy nearly broke his tooth on a silver sickle and bited in a slice. Harry watched Hagrid getting redder and redder in the face as he called for more wine, finally kissing Professor McGonagall on the cheek, who to Harry's amazement giggled and blushed, her top hat lopsided. Harry and the Weasleys spent a happy afternoon having a furious snowball fight on the grounds. Then, cold, wet, and gasping for breath, they returned to the fire in the Gryffindor common room, where Harry broke in his new chess set by losing spectacularly to Ron. After a meal of turkey sandwiches, crumpets, trifle, and Christmas cake, everyone felt too full and sleepy to do much before bed except sit and watch Percy chase Fred and George all over Gryffindor Tower, because they've stolen his perfect badge. It has been Harry's best Christmas day ever. Yet something had been nagging at the back of his mind all day. Not until he climbed into bed was he free to think about it. The invisibility cloak, and whoever had sent it. Ron, full of turkey and cake and with nothing mysterious bothering him, fell asleep almost as soon as he drew on the curtains of his four-poster. Harry leaned over the side of his own bed and pulled the cloak out from under it. His father's. This had been his father's. He let the material flow over his hands, smoother than silk, light as air. Use it well, the note had said. Use it well. Suddenly, Harry felt wide awake. A piercing, blood-curdling shriek split the silence. The book was screaming. Harry snapped it shut. The shriek went on and on. He came to a sudden halt in front of a tall suit of armor. He had been so busy getting away from the library, he hadn't paid attention to where he was going. Harry stood rooted in the top spot as Filch and Snape came around the corner ahead. They couldn't see him, of course, but it was a narrow corridor, and if they came much nearer, then they knocked right into him. The cloak didn't stop him from being solid. He stumbled upon an unused classroom. The dark shapes of desks and chairs were piled against the walls, and there was an upturned wastepaper basket. It was a magnificent mirror, as high as the ceiling, with an ornate gold frame standing on two clawed feet. There was an inscription carved around the top. Erise stra tru oiti kun awasi. His panic fading now, there was no sign of Filch and Snape. Harry moved nearer to the mirror, wanting to look at himself, but no reflection again. He stepped in front of it. The room was empty. Then, Harry looked over his shoulder. He was, in fact, in a room full of invisible people, and this mirror's trick was that it reflected them, invisible or not. He looked in the mirror again. A woman, standing right behind his reflection, was smiling at him and waving. She was a very pretty woman. She had dark red hair, and her eyes are just like mine, Harry thought, edging a little closer to the glass. Bright green, exactly the same shape, but then he noticed she was crying. Smiling, but crying at the same time. Then a tall, thin, black-haired man sitting next to her put his arm around her. He wore glasses, and his hair was very untidy. It stuck up at the back, just as Harry's did. Harry was so close to the mirror now that his nose was nearly touching that of his reflection. "Mom?" he whispered. "Dad?" They looked at him, smiling. He couldn't stay there. He had to find his way back to bed. He tore his eyes away from his mother's face, whispered, "I'll come back," and he hurried from the room. "You could have woken me up," said Ron. "You can come tonight. I'm coming back. I want to show you the mirror." "I'd like to see you, Mom and Dad," said Ron. So, Harry couldn't eat. He had seen his parents and wouldn't be seeing them again tonight. He had almost forgotten about Femel. It didn't seem very important anymore. He cared what the three-headed dog was guarding. What did it matter if Snape stole it, really? "Are you all right?" said Ron. "You look odd." What Harry feared most was that he might not be able to find the mirror again, room again. With Ron covered in the cloak, too, they had to walk much more slower the next night. "I'm freezing," said Ron. "Let's forget it and go back." "No," Harry hissed. "I know it's here somewhere." They pushed the door open. Harry dropped the cloak from around his shoulders and ran to the mirror. There they were. His mother and father beamed at the sight of him. "See," Harry whispered. "I can't see anything." Look at them all. There are loads of them. I can only see you. Look at it properly. Go on. Stand where I am." Harry stepped aside, but with Ron in front of the mirror, he couldn't see his family anymore. Just Ron, his paisley pajamas. Ron, though, was staring transfixed at his image. "Look at me," he said. "Can you see all your family standing around you?" "No, I'm alone. But I'm different. I look older. And I'm head boy." "What?" "I am. I'm wearing the badge like Bill used to. And I'm holding the house cup and the Quidditch cup. And I'm Quidditch captain, too." Ron tore his eyes away from his splendid sight to look excitedly at Harry. "Do you think this mirror shows the future?" "How can it? All my family are dead." "Let me have another look. You had it yourself all last night. Give me a bit more time." You're only holding the Quidditch cup. What's interesting about that? I want to see my parents. Don't push me. Ron threw the cloak back over them. Luminous eyes of Mrs. Norris came around the door. Ron and Harry stood there silent. This isn't safe. She might have gone for Filch. I bet she heard us come on. And Ron pulled Harry out of the room. The snow still hadn't melted the next morning. Want to play chess, Harry, said Ron. No. Why don't we go and visit Hagrid? No, you go. I know what you're thinking about, Harry. That mirror. Don't go back tonight. Why not? I don't know. I've just got a bad feeling about it. And anyway, you've had too many close shaves already. Filch, Snape, and Mrs. Norris are wandering around. So what if they can't see you? What if they walk into you? What if you knock something over? You sound like Hermione. I'm serious, Harry. Don't go. But Harry had only one thought in his head, which was to get back in front of the mirror, and Ron wasn't going to stop him. Harry was back at the mirror, with his mother and father smiling at him again, and one of his grandfathers nodding happily. Harry sank down to sit on the floor in front of the mirror. There was nothing to stop him from staying there all night with his family. Nothing at all. Except... So, back again, Harry? Harry felt as though his insides had turned to ice. He looked behind him. Sitting on one of the desks by the wall was none other than Albus Dumbledore. Harry must have walked straight past him, so desperate to get to the mirror he hadn't noticed him. I didn't see you, Professor. Strange how nearsighted being invisible can make you, said Dumbledore, and Harry was relieved to see that he was smiling. So, said Dumbledore, slipping off the desk to sit on the floor with Harry, you, like hundreds before you, have discovered the delights of the Mirror of Ezreist. I didn't know it was called that, sir, but I expect you realize by now what it does. It shows me my family. And it showed your friend Ron himself as head boy. How did you know? I don't need a cloak to become invisible, said Dumbledore. Now, can you think what the Mirror of Ezreist shows us all? Harry shook his head. Let me explain. The happiest man on earth would be able to use the mirror like a normal mirror. That is, he would look into it and see himself exactly as he is. Does that help? Harry thought, then he said slowly, it shows us what we want. Whatever we want. Yes and no, said Dumbledore. It shows us nothing more or less than the deepest, most desperate desire of our hearts. You, who have never known your family, see them standing around you. Ronald Weasley, who has always been overshadowed by his brothers, sees himself standing alone, the best out of all of them. However, this mirror will give us neither knowledge or truth. Men have wasted away before it, entranced by what they have seen or been driven mad, not knowing if what it shows is real or even possible. The mirror will be moved to a new house tomorrow, Harry, and I ask you not to go looking for it again. If you ever do run across it, you will now be prepared. It does not do to dwell on dreams and forget to live. Remember that. Now, why don't you put that admiral cloak back on and get off to bed? Harry stood up. Sir, Professor Dumbledore, can I ask you something? Obviously, you've just done so, Dumbledore smiled. You may ask me one more thing, however. What do you see when you look in the mirror? I see myself holding a pair of thick woolen socks. Harry stared. One can never have enough socks, said Dumbledore. Another Christmas has come and gone, and I didn't get a single pair. People will insist on giving me books. It was only when he was back in bed that it struck Harry that Dumbledore might not have been quite truthful. But then, he thought, as he shoved Scabbers off his pillow, it had been quite a personal question. Yeah, that's the Christmas chapter. So good. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this ASMR story time, this special Christmas edition. I love you guys so much, and yeah, I bid you guys a good night, and I hope you guys have sweet dreams, and hope you guys dream of sugar plums. Hope you guys were sipping up your hot cocoa or your hot tea and just relaxing in your bed, you know? That's what this video is for. It's a vibe. It's to relax you. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed. But I'll be seeing you guys in the next one. Have a good night, everybody.